First, I want to do another brief test, and this is to see how your memory works during a period of learning.
Welcome to the VO2 Lounge, alcohol and its effects on sleep. Now this is something that I've thought about in varying different capacities as I've gone through my life as an of-age drinking adult. Now, when I was in my sort of 18 to 22, 21 years of age kind of era, I still played rugby at the time and I drank on weekends here and there kind of thing. And of course, you're out late, you've had some drinks, maybe you're getting into bed at 4 a.m. I always ended up getting up at 8 a.m. still. So it wasn't really something that I directly went, alcohol consumption, poor quality of sleep. I just went going out, staying up late, probably eating something pretty late as well. I could have eaten a meal at 3 a.m. at that point, and all of this compiling into a short and not that great night's sleep. But then as I've got older and now in my life, I don't really casually drink. I never did then. I didn't drink, say, every other night like a bottle of beer or a glass of wine or anything, and I still don't do that. However, when we occasionally go to France and some other friends in the UK, for example, we often can find ourselves in a position, or at least I can, where maybe midday I'm having a drink of some description, maybe a glass or two of wine, a beer, something like that. And I always find that then the day after, I just don't feel rested. I feel like, even though I've had a very easy day, I've just been mooching about, I've been eating a lot of food, I've potentially got to bed in a very similar window that I normally would, and then had additional sleep, I still don't feel particularly rested. It has always kind of weighed on me in that sense, post sort of the night out drinking era. And with the current day, the Huberman Labs and the Tia Drive podcast, it's become aware to a lot of people the effects that alcohol directly has on sleep quality. So I thought, why not? It's about time I look at it in a sort of deeper view. I had a previous podcast that spoke about alcohol and its effects for athletes, and there was a very short section where I went over the effects for sleep. The reason for that was because I found this paper, and I wanted to review it in a single episode in a longer format than just trying to incorporate it into a different episode. So let's get into it. Sleep is essential for humans, coming into two main types: REM, rapid eye movement sleep, and NREM, non-rapid eye movement sleep. These types have distinct brain activities, with REM accounting for around 75 to 80% of sleep, and non-REM covering 75 to 80%, and REM covering the remaining 20 to 25% of sleep. Now, alcohol affects sleep by altering brain chemicals, and with repeated use, alcohol develops tolerances and dependence, needing more alcohol for the same effect. Now, this disrupts the brain balance, and withdrawal in dependent individuals can lead to tissue and brain readjust, damage essentially. Now, healthy sleep has four main stages. The non-REM stages include stage 1, which is light sleep with theta brainwaves, which are 4 to 7 hertz. That's 4 to 7 times per second. The oscillation, essentially, like the sine wave. Deeper non-REM sleep, which is stage 2, with sleep spindles, which are at 12 to 16 hertz, and K complexes making up 45 to 50% of total sleep. That is this stage 2 deep non-REM sleep. Stage 3 and 4, which is N3 or SWS, which is the deepest non-REM sleep with slow delta waves at 0.3 to 2 hertz, so very slow waves relative to the 12 to 16 hertz that we're seeing in the stage 2 of sleep. Now, this comprises of about 18% of total sleep. Now, then we get onto REM, everyone's favorite level of sleep. When there's an advert, I feel like it's always saying, get more REM sleep. Although It's a lot of stuff. You don't really want to alter how much of each stage you're getting because there's an amount of them for a reason. Just want more sleep in general. Now, REM sleep involves faster theta and beta waves, similar to wakefulness, and alternates with non-REM in 90-minute cycles. By morning, non-REM stage 2 and REM are the most prominent. Now, this is where the whole kind of napping thing comes from. You'll hear it in probably Huberman Lab podcast episodes where they talk about these 90-minute cycles and the reason for it. These 90-minute naps, and the reason for it is linked to this whole 90-minute sleep cycles where you're coming out of a stage into this transitionary, potentially lighter stage, and that is the optimal point to come out. That's why I thought maybe when you wake up some mornings, you get that real jarring effect, and that could potentially be you're just getting interrupted in one of these cycles, essentially. Now, sleep is controlled by two key processes: the body's circadian rhythm, which probably by this point everyone has heard of before, and sleep pressure from time awake. Again, something that you will hear on any of these kind of in-depth episodes on sleep. Now, this pressure peaks early in the night, promoting deep non-REM sleep, and gradually dissipates throughout the night as essentially you become recharged. Now, sleep supports brain health, memory, and emotional stability, and poor sleep, for example, people who suffer from insomnia, is linked to issues like immune dysfunction and high risk of alcohol misuse. Treating insomnia can support alcohol recovery and potentially reduce relapse risks, is what people have thought to be the case. Now, it's not even an anecdote, it's more of a statement that I've heard, and I think encapsulates the importance of sleep very well, because you obviously get something like the Dwayne Johnsons of this world, where either it's almost like not braggadocious isn't quite the word, but there is a positive association with this working hard mentality, not needing lots of sleep. And yes, it is the case that people need varying amounts, but I don't think there's really any evidence that anyone only needs 4 hours, for example. And the best way of putting it is, look, if you slept 8 hours a day / what roughly you're intended to sleep, that is 1/3 of your life spent sleeping. Now, you look at it in the way of nothing in this world happens sort of by chance when it comes to evolution. In the sense that if our purpose realistically on this planet as a living organism is to, be born, grow up to the point we can reproduce ourselves, which requires us to, hunt for food, gather food, eat the food, cook the food, do whatever that is, avoid predators, and then reproduce when we're at reproductive age successfully to then pass on our genetic code onto the next set of offspring, which none of this can be done while you're asleep. You can't reproduce, you can't evade predators, you can't eat, you can't cook, you can't hunt for food, you can't gather food. You can't do anything other than sleep. So if there was a method of reducing that portion of time or eliminating it completely, then evolution would have almost guaranteed removed it from our requirements in reality. There are organisms that sleep more than us, organisms that sleep less than us. However, in our case, the way we've evolved is realistically within this kind of 8-hour-ish window. And so that's the argument I like to put forward, because I heard it at some point. It's not original, it's not my own. However, I think it is a great way of summarizing how important it is that it would have been removed and it would have been commonplace in our requirements. And the experiment I like to put forward to people is who say that, they do fine on 5 hours of sleep, right? I'm like, first of all, you don't know that you're doing fine because you haven't realized how much better you'd feel if you were sleeping 8 hours or 7.5. But the experiment I always put forward to them is, okay, get rid of the alarm, next time you go on holiday or have the opportunity to get rid of the alarm or get into bed earlier, just for 1 week, get into bed at like 9 p.m. Get into bed, set your alarm for 7 o'clock so that you don't miss work, and do that for an entire week and weekend. And if you suddenly start getting up at 4 a.m. because you only need 4 hours sleep or something, or earlier, should I say, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., or whatever 4 hours equates to, then great. Okay, you know what? You've won. You only need 4 hours sleep. But I almost guarantee that to begin with, they'll run into the alarm, and after that point, that they've actually got over what is essentially like a jet lag that they've got. That, yes, they won't sleep for 10 hours. Maybe they sleep for 7.5 consistently, or 8, or 8.5, or 9, or whatever the number is. Essentially, that is the amount of sleep you need, because without any external factors, your body's mediating to that number, and there you go. There's the number. But I digress. Let's continue on with the episode. So we've kind of spoken about it in my little ramble, but what are the acute effects of alcohol on sleep? Like what does it actually do to people and their sleep? So as we know, sleep in humans typically lasts about 8 hours. When alcohol is consumed before bed, its effects on sleep change throughout the night as blood alcohol levels rise, peak, and then fall due to metabolism. It eventually gets rid of it in the body. Now, initially, alcohol acts as a sedative, making it easier to fall asleep, and increases deep, slow-wave sleep in the first half of the night. However, REM sleep is often reduced early in the night. And we can all vouch for this, really, is that if you are on a night out, one, you're absolutely knackered. But really, if you have a more casual environment where maybe you have 3 pints of beer or you have a couple glasses of wine, generally you get to sleep easier due to the sedative effects. And also, I think it just gets rid of some of the brain chatter. Like if you're a particularly kind of thoughtful individual / not anxious isn't the right word, just busy in your head, it definitely quiets down that band of noise occurring in your head. Now, as blood alcohol levels decline in the second half of the night, sleep becomes lighter and more disrupted, with more awakenings or shifts in light sleep, which is stage 1. This pattern of initial sedation, followed by poor sleep, can lead to a cycle of self-treatment where people use alcohol to fall asleep but then experience poor sleep quality, daytime drowsiness, and often turn to caffeine, worsening sleep issues. About 1 in 10 people use alcohol as a sleep aid to self-treat sleep problems. That's from surveys in the US in particular. Now, that is also a little thing that I like to throw at people, is if they're heavy caffeine consumers, right, throughout the day, 1, caffeine has its own effects on sleep, but 2, it can also be I drink coffee mainly because of the taste, the flavor profile. Specifically, I'm not going to get into it in depth, but like a single origin coffee brewed through, like, say, an AeroPress or a Clever Dripper, for example, is something I enjoy. It's a hobby more than anything, and I run out of beans normally, unless there's a particular reason where I want to use caffeine itself to switch on and focus on something. I won't really turn to then an instant or a coffee that the flavor that I need to add various numbers of sugars. I tend to then just stick to, for example, black tea, which, yes, has caffeine, but on a completely different magnitude to what I would normally be consuming. Now, research shows that alcohol impacts sleep differently on a single versus multiple nights of drinking. Though studies on repeated use are limited and often have small sample sizes, there's evidence for it. Now, only 5 studies involving 19 men and 5 women have investigated the effects of consecutive nights of alcohol consumption, with variations in dose, timing, and number of nights studied. Now, these studies generally show alcohol increases slow-wave sleep in the first part of the night, but suppresses REM sleep. For instance, slow-wave sleep increased on the first drinking night in some studies, but not in others. Phage et al. Found that increases in slow wave sleep persisted over 3 nights, whereas REM sleeps suppressed on the first drinking night in some studies, with a reduced REM density, frequency of eye movements is what they're measuring there. That's how they do this REM density, across multiple nights at higher alcohol levels. And in general, these findings suggest that tolerance to alcohol affects the effect on slow wave and REM sleep, essentially, but the limited sample sizes and inconsistent results highlighted the need for further research. I think really the acute effects on a macro level aren't necessarily completely like the level of disruption and change and shift. It's simply the fact that there's a commonality of this effect happening that is the key thing. Anything that's really tampering with sleep is probably not great, really, is the simple answer for that. There's this thing called EEG data, which is a computerized analysis of sleep. Now, this can reveal subtle region-specific effects of alcohol that may be missed with manual scoring. Now, only a few studies have examined how alcohol affects EEG power, a measure of brainwave strength during sleep, and findings vary due to differences in alcohol dose, timing, methods used for administering. Now, Rendell et al. Found that 0.9 grams per kilogram of alcohol in young men decreased beta power and increased the measure of alpha-like activity. Another study observed increases in delta power and reduced sigma power in the first 2 hours. To be clear, so the delta power is linked to deep sleep and the sigma power is related to these sleep spindles. And now in the first 2 hours of sleep in young men after 0.6 grams per kilogram of alcohol. Another study found increased delta and theta power in various brain regions in older men following 0.55 grams per kilogram of alcohol, especially in the frontal and central brain regions early in the night. So generally, this kind of modeled method, again, is further evidence for the fact that it is just simply tampering with the sleep process. And I want to interject here in the sense that this episode really is not coming from a place of, I think every human being should be teetotal. That's far really from what I think my thoughts are on it. It's more of an awareness around the frequency of, because there's always this kind of, I'm not going to say misconception, I'm going to say conception that a frequent lower dose amount of alcohol, so say like a half a glass a day or a bottle of beer a day, for example, is better than the same volume consumed in 1 day. Now, whether or not that's true or not, I'm not here to say whether that's the case. But for the person who drinks casually, may never consume more than 3 glasses of wine, for example, in a single go, but perpetually consumes alcohol almost every day or every other day, the effects it has on sleep are things that I don't think should really be overlooked for individuals. And then in the athletic sense, really what this shows so far, when we'll be going on to it, we'll go into more detail and the kind of sleep in alcoholism and alcohol dependence and all this, which will go down a bit more of a rabbit hole. But for the athlete, really, if you're someone who wants to compete at a high level or even achieve the best results they ever have, clearly that does not coincide with repeated alcohol consumption. As much as it may be a habitual thing that you do in the evening before bed or so on, it doesn't look the most promising for it as a advisable thing to do if either longevity or general fitness are concerned, at least. But moving on from that, there was a section on this paper referring to sleep and alcoholism. Now, research shows a strong link between insomnia and alcoholism, with 36 to 91, big range, but range nonetheless, of alcohol-dependent individuals experiencing sleep issues either during drinking or within weeks after stopping drinking. Now, alcoholism often leads to poor sleep habits such as irregular sleep schedules and daytime napping, which contribute to nighttime wakefulness and poorer sleep quality. Now, studies on people abstaining from alcohol often reveal sleep disturbances with increased wakefulness and lower sleep efficacy, which is just efficiency. I shouldn't have said efficacy. Now, sleep efficiency is simply time spent asleep in bed. Now, sleep quality usually improves over extended. I'll re-say that. Sleep efficiency is literally the ratio between time spent in bed and then the actual amount of time you sleep. So you'd have poor sleep efficiency if you spent 8 hours in bed but got 4 hours of sleep, whereas high efficiency would be 8 hours in bed, 7 hours and 55 minutes of sleep, for example. Now, common findings include reduced slow wave sleep and increased REM sleep, pressure, an urge to enter REM sleep more quickly, especially shortly after stopping alcohol. This REM increase might either be the lasting effect of alcohol on the brain function or reflect an underlying predisposition to altered sleep patterns. Now, spectral analysis of sleep reveals distinct differences between alcohol-dependent individuals and controls, particularly in slower frequency. Now, alcoholics generally show reduced non-REM delta power, or that like 0.7 to 4 hertz, especially during the first non-REM period, along with a lower total power and trend toward decreased theta power. Now, these effects generally stronger in frontal regions and more pronounced in African American alcoholics and African American alcoholics, Europeans, Americans. Now, reduced slow wave activity and a lower delta frequency in non-REM sleep in alcoholics could suggest underlying brain structure changes related to the alcoholism. Now, really, that's all very specific, but it's just showing the long-lasting effects it could have. I hope no one listening to this suffers from alcoholism or is an alcoholic, because it's a hard thing to deal with. The aim of this is to just get the low-level kind of what I'll call a passive user. You're not passive, but you're the individual using it in what you could consider a healthy. They don't have an unhealthy necessary relationship with it. Maybe they consume it every day, but like, for example, a beer, for example, because they enjoy the flavor and the side effects, or the effect, a bit like me drinking coffee where I want the flavor, but it happens to have caffeine. I'm not dependent on that caffeine hit, but it's part of the process. Unfortunately, the alcohol being more damaging, essentially, it's a shame, but, potentially consider alcohol-free variants and so on and so forth. Now, alcohol dependence is also an interesting factor in the sense that how it correlates with insomnia. Now, insomnia in adults is a known risk factor for alcohol dependence, and recent studies suggest that sleep issues may precede alcohol use problems in adolescence as well. Adolescence is marked by significant changes in sleep behavior, such as later bedtimes, evening chronotype preference, reduced sleep duration, and notable decline in slow wave sleep, potentially due to social, environmental, and physiological factors. Now, adolescents who experience sleep issues are more likely to report mood disturbances, memory problems, conduct disorders, and increased substance use, including alcohol. Now, poor sleep quality and short sleep duration have been found to predict alcohol use disorders, with perceived tiredness and poor sleep habits explain a significant portion of substance use behaviors. Now, even in chronotype or circadian phase delay also correlates with increased alcohol use among teens. And one prospective study found that chronic insomnia predicted alcohol use among adolescents 1 year later, while another indicated that early childhood sleep disturbances predicted early substance use onset in adolescence. Now, suggests that treating adolescent sleep problems may prevent or delay substance uses, highlighting the need for longitudinal studies exploring the link between essentially sleep behavior and future alcohol abuse. And it's a shame, really, but everyone knows that kind of shift in the pattern as you kind of get in your teens, kind of thing, in how your sleep patterns are altered, and obviously this environmental factors changing. Maybe you've moved away from home, maybe you're at uni, so on and so forth, and the environment changes, and the desire or ability to now stay up later and just, be around friends or drinking with friends or whatever can then correlate into this irregular and poor sleep pattern that can then, as it says, lead into all these different factors. Now back to kind of the more specific sleep things, and we'll just talk a bit about sleep homeostasis and the circadian rhythm and the disturbances around it related to, of course, alcohol. And now a lot of this paper, what you have to understand is, it is from the focus of the effects in relation to alcoholics, because obviously it's going to have the highest magnitude of effect on an individual and their livelihood and so on and so forth. But obviously you can take away from it what the sort of casual user is going to be experiencing, just on a lower scale, really. Research on sleep in abstinent alcoholics, particularly regarding sleep homeostasis and circadian rhythm, is limited. A study found no homeostatic recovery in slow wave sleep or delta EEG power among alcoholics during a partial sleep deprivation study. Similarly, studies by Bauer et al. And Armitage et al. Reported a blunted response to sleep challenges and indicating a slower decay of slow wave activity in alcoholics compared to controls. Now, few studies have examined circadian rhythms in chronic alcoholics, with most focusing on acute withdrawal. And now some research indicates no melatonin rhythm immediately after cessation of drinking, but normal rhythms can restore after 2 weeks. Now, conversely, one study noted a delay in melatonin peak and rise time in African American alcoholics 2 weeks post withdrawal. Now, cortisol rhythms appear unaffected by affected early in withdrawal. And generally, overall evidence suggests that blunted sleep homeostasis may persist into sort of the cessation of alcohol consumption, with potential circadian rhythm disturbances observed during acute withdrawal, especially in severe cases like delirium. Abnormal REM sleep timing can last longer into the abstinence period, and circadian misalignment may contribute to disrupted brain reward functions and related to alcohol use disorders. Now, we can look at sleep potentials and the neurochemical effects of alcohol, really, on the sort of slightly, we're getting a bit deeper, but bear with me. Starting with sleep potentials, sleep event related potentials help scientists study how the brain produces slow brain waves during sleep, and how this process is impacted by drinking alcohol, either in the short term or after years of heavy drinking. When sounds of breathing cues are presented to people during sleep, the brain creates certain predictable signals, such as the P2 component appearing at around 200 milliseconds, as well as the N350, the N55, and the P900 components. Now, a special feature in sleep ERPs called the K complex is important for these responses. Now, it's a big, slow brainwave that may protect sleep by responding to disturbances. Now, researchers show that it is generated in the brain's cortex and not deeper structures. And the K complex is tied to strong, slow wave activity seen in deep sleep. Now, the K complex and its related N550 component need the involvement of many neurons working together, which depends on healthy brain pathways. These signals weaken as people age due to natural brain changes, such as the loss of grey matter. And in alcoholics, long-term heavy drinking harms both the grey matter, or neurons, and white matter, which are brain connections, leading to smaller brain waves like N550. Now, 2 key studies show that people who stop drinking after years of alcohol dependency generate fewer K complexes and have smaller N550s and P900s signals compared to non-alcoholics. This indicates long-term alcohol use effects on how the brain produces certain sleep-related brain waves. Now, it's not to scare anyone. I mean, maybe if someone is an alcoholic, it's the thing that makes them think, oh, well, okay, there is some long-lasting effects. Whether this is going to be the case for people who've just, consumed a moderate amount, it's hard to say from the research. A lot of it, as said, focuses on this heavy use. But if you assume it's going to be somewhat exponential, so down the bottom, in theory, you can't linearly extrapolate it. But if we assume worst case and that it is linear, then potentially there is still going to be some long lasting, although smaller, effects of alcohol on long-term sleep. Now, the neurochemical effects of alcohol. Sleep is controlled by various chemical systems in the brain. Now, during non-REM sleep, certain chemicals are reduced, while alcohol mainly affects sleep by boosting the action of GABA, a calming brain chemical. This makes the brain more synchronized, creating patterns called sleep spindles and deeper, slow brain waves known as delta waves on a brain activity recording. The switch between non-REM and REM, which is like your dreaming kind of rapid eye movements phase, sleep involves a balance of different brain chemicals. Now, alcohol tends to reduce REM sleep because of its calming effects on the brain, but experiments on animals show that blocking GABA can actually increase REM sleep, confirming alcohol's role in suppressing it. Alcohol also enhances certain brain receptors that lead to more slow delta activity, but lowers sleep spindles and related activity. Now, this differs from the effects of drugs like benzodiazepine. With long-term alcohol use, sleep patterns change. Chronic drinking can lead to more REM sleep and less deep sleep, likely due to the changes in how GABA receptors work. These adaptations could make the brain less able to shut down REM sleep. Other factors like inflammation may also play a role, as seen when anti-inflammatory drugs normalize REM sleep in recovering alcoholics. And chronic alcoholism also leads to brain damage, such as reduced grey matter and weaker brain connections. This contributes to lower delta wave activity and weaker responses during sleep. And other changes in the brain chemistry might also reduce delta waves. But all in all, really, alcohol's effects on sleep, incredibly complex, involving shifts in brain chemicals, structural damage, especially with long-term use. I don't know where that leads people, to be honest. It's something that, to me, I've never been a consistent heavy drinker. I've never been a daily one. So it was more a phase in and out of just time in life where the number of times I went out on a late night were more frequent. And now I've come to a point where it's not really, it's few and far between for the most part. And then any time I do come to the point where I'm going to consume alcohol, one, the infrequency is high enough that usually I don't have to really think about it too much. And two, on the occasion where it is next to a really, when I say a really key session, really what I mean is a session where maybe I'm going on a long ride with a group of friends, and I don't want to try use alcohol in this social activity to somehow improve it, to then take away from the other social activity that is involving exercise. And then the other time is really a race. Like I'm highly, if not guaranteed, not to consume alcohol 2 days before a race, or even a smaller race. I'm highly unlikely to consume alcohol 2 days before. So what's your takeaway from all this? Feel free to share your opinions with me on Instagram, email, on the VO2 Lounge Discord server, which all the links will be down below. For more content like this, explore my previous works. Follow the show if you like what you hear and don't want to miss another episode. 5-star reviews are always welcome. And lastly, I would like to challenge you to share the pod with one of your friends today. It really helps the pod grow. Now, thank you for tuning in, and until next time, it's goodbye.